Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike Zamrzla with the U.S. Senator Jerry Moran's office, and welcome to today's COVID-19 small business discussion. First off, thank you to Councilman Brandon Johnson and Megan Lovely with the City of Wichita for organizing today's conversation. We're committed to having a open and transparent discussion and appreciate so much interest in this conversation during this tough time. We'll do introductions of panelists and then also answer pre-submitted questions, and then finally take questions at the end from our live stream. We would ask that you post your email with questions so that we can be sure to get back to you if we don't have an opportunity to address your comments or your question today. I'll begin with just some brief opening remarks on behalf of the Senator, and then kick it to our panelists that are with us today. Certainly on behalf of the Senator, he asked me to thank you for being here and being a part of this conversation. He recognizes certainly the challenges our city and our state and our nation are going through due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and certainly appreciates all of the hard work that small business owners and their employees are doing right now to get through this tough time, recognizing that each of us are doing our part, certainly to assist our family members, our neighbors, our members of our fellow community, and our fellow Kansans to come out of this better on the other side. So thank you for all your sacrifice, and thank you for all your efforts, again, during this challenging time. The timeliness of this call, as it turns out, couldn't be more appropriate due to the fact that just earlier this week, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the first United States Senate passed, then the U.S. House passed, and just this morning, President Trump signed into law what's known as COVID-19 phase 3.5, keeping all of those numbers straight, the next assistance package to try to assist Americans and assist Kansans through this process. Contained in that was $310 billion for a replenishment of the SBA Paycheck Protection program, and I know Wayne Bell will talk about that in a little more detail later. Also, there was an additional $50 billion included for the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And that one change to that loan program compared to prior legislation was that now includes agricultural enterprises as being eligible entities under that EIDL program. Also of importance to the Senator, and something he pushed to have included, is there as $25 billion for testing, COVID-19 testing in that bill. Of which $21.2 million will come directly back to Kansas to increase access to COVID-19 testing. Something the Senator's heard from all Kansans, small business owners included, is that one of the obstacles to getting our economy back up and running again is to have more robust testing presence so that we can feel safe as Kansans and get back into opening up our economy. So that was a priority of the Senator's, and would now kick it to our next panelist that I'll recognize, Patty Clark from the Kansas Department of Commerce, for some opening comments. Patty?
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with everybody this afternoon. Commerce is the lead economic development organization for the state. We focus on business retention and recruitment, international trade, community development, and workforce development. Governor Kelly mentioned in her daily press briefing last Wednesday, and again today, we are moving into a new phase in COVID response and recovery, and we want to ensure that we strike a balance between the health of all Kansans as well as the health of the Kansas economy. I want to provide just a couple of updates on workforce, our Secretary Toland's outreach efforts, a little bit more on unemployment insurance, and a reminder of programs that are available to nonprofits as well as what we're doing for for-profit small businesses. There is a COVID jobs website. It is kansasworks.com/coronavirus. It connects job seekers with Kansas businesses that are hiring to fill urgent needs. Currently, there are opportunities out there, and we encourage employers and job seekers to use this free service. There are over 2,000 jobs posted on the site, and it's getting a lot of use. We've heard several reports from our companies and businesses that have hired people from this jobs website. So a reminder that that is out there for businesses and job seekers to connect. Secretary Toland has already held conference calls with 59 businesses and communities the last several weeks and touched base with over 1,500 Kansans all across the state. Do want to let you know that as of yesterday, the pandemic unemployment compensation, which was a part of the CARES Act, that provides the $600 additional weekly payment for unemployment insurance, went live yesterday on the Department of Labor website. Those that are eligible, once they apply for state benefits, they will automatically receive the federal benefit. We're still working to implement the other elements of the stimulus package that apply to those individuals that are self-employed or independent contractors, and just continue to monitor the DOL website when that feature goes live. Do want to mention that some of the care benefits are available to nonprofits, and I know Wayne can talk about that, but also want to remind folks in Wichita that the Community Service Tax Credit Program, which is administered by the State Department of Commerce, has now opened for applications. We have $4.1 million in funding tax credits available, with $1 million of that earmarked for daycare projects. We know that our employers and their employees are struggling with daycare, and we have devoted $1 million of those tax credits for daycare projects. And you can find information on the Commerce website. Do want to share that we did partner with SBA. Thank you, Wayne, for all the training that you did for our staff as we began to help process EIDL, the EIDL loans, as well as help with access to the PPP loans. We featured an online chat to our website, and over 200 businesses have already used that feature to answer questions about both those programs, trying to take a little bit of pressure off of it, provide some upfront information before application. We know that that will get busy again now that their funds have been added to those two programs. Just also want to mention that we are working with Kansas Manufacturing Solutions to really inventory our manufacturers to see not only how they're doing, but if they can pivot resources, pivot production lines to the production and manufacturing of PPE for purposes of the healthcare industry, but also for individual protection and employee protection. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker.
Patty, thank you. Our next panelist is County Commissioner Lacey Cruse. Commissioner.
Thank you. Again, my name is Lacey Cruse. I am the commissioner that represents the 4th District. I also serve as the Board of Health, one member on that as well in Sedgwick County. I just want to reiterate the county is still operating under the governor's stay-at-home order, which is set to expire May the 1st. We also still, following the governor's order, limiting gatherings to 10 or less. Dr. Menz, our public health official, has the authority to set a stay-at-home order for the county. As you know, our city officials and our other county officials and community leaders, we are starting to work on plans for a recovery and a reopening of businesses and organizations. I get it. It is scary and frustrating time in our community. I am really proud of all the healthcare workers and the first responders for keeping everyone safe. I want to just say thank you to all of those businesses that are operating grocery stores, doctors' offices, our hospital workers, postal service, all of those businesses out there that are providing us with to-go meals. You know, we had a meeting this morning with with quite a group of small business owners We understand there were some that didn't quite get on the call this morning, but we will be reaching out to those. And the thing that we heard from them this morning were a set of clear guidelines where we can recognize that one size doesn't fit all for every single location here in our community serving the public. We need to communicate clearly about what those guidelines are going to be. We also heard about access to PPE and other supplies, and maintaining a steady stream of communication about the numbers and whether we're going forward as far as a spike or a decrease. We really want to carefully plan to open things and make sure that we don't see those spikes or clusters. And because we know that if those things happen, it's worse in the long term for business and the recovery of our community. So I want to say thanks for the opportunity to be on the call today. And I want to give it over to my colleague across the street, Councilman Johnson.
Thanks, Commissioner. Again, thank you all for being a part of this call. I know that I, along with many of you, have received a lot of questions in regarding the funding and small business issues, and this is a great opportunity to get some of those answered. And I have specifically heard from a lot of folks in the barber beauty community and other smaller businesses that may not have had access originally to these funds or put in an application, and the money ran out. Now they're kind of wondering where they stand. So I'll stop there and kick it back to you, Mike. But those are the things that I've heard, and I'm looking forward to this discussion today.
I want to make sure we have an opportunity to hear from our final panelist, SBA District Administrator Wayne Bell. Wayne?
All right, thank you very much, Mike. And great to be on the call or on the presentation here with everyone. I want to thank Councilmember Brandon Johnson. His office reached out to me pretty early in the process, and again, happy to be a part of it. Also, would be remiss if I didn't thank my good friend and colleague, Patty Clark, Deputy Secretary for Kansas Department of Commerce. She and I worked very closely, really, as I reflect on this time frame and the Kansas response, if you will, to this pandemic. I believe we started our conversations probably would have been early or mid-February in pursuits of the disaster declaration that ultimately, and my time frame may be a little bit off. I think it may have even been early March, but we worked very closely through the process so that the governor could submit the request for a disaster declaration. Ultimately, SBA's administrator signed the coronavirus disaster declaration. I believe the time frame would have been around March 31st or so. And ever since, it's been really a collaborative effort to get the word out of SBA's resources, resources to help businesses that are impacted, such as the economic injury disaster loans, as well as the economic injury disaster loans advance or idle advance, as well as the now Paycheck Protection program. And only thing I would add here is that in collaboration, not only with the Kansas Department of Commerce, but with the small business development centers, other stakeholders such as the Chamber, City of Wichita, on and on, we have been able to participate in a number of community forums like this to talk about those programs and to talk about the process that applicants and business owners would have to take part in order to obtain funding. And so anyway, in Kansas, we've been able to, through the Paycheck Protection program, in total, I think there have been over $4 billion in loans that were approved in that first phase. And I'm confident in the next phase, Kansas is certainly going to be well represented in terms of our share of those dollars. We've worked very closely with stakeholders such as the Kansas Bankers Association to make sure that all of the commercial lenders in the state have access to our loan portal, and that they're informed of the process for submitting applications. And I believe right now we're well positioned to get those affected businesses the capital needed through that program. And then the EIDLE program, that's the program that is the direct loan with the SBA. And we're educating the public constantly, and business owners and various entities that support small business. We're educating everyone on the process for submitting those applications online. And so, for the sake of time and for our discussion here, I'll stop there. But we have really been a part of a big effort to educate and raise awareness of how to use these resources for those affected. Thank you,
Wayne,
Mike.
thank you. I'll turn it over to Councilman Johnson to moderate our conversation. Brandon.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. And again, thank you all for your introductions. We'll jump right into some questions that have been pre-submitted, but I do want to remind anyone watching, if you have questions, please submit those and add your email address. That way, if we don't get to you today in this conversation, we can get you a directly emailed response. So with that, we'll get started. I'm going to jump around to some of the questions you all have seen already. One of the first questions is, will essential businesses who have stayed open and spending resources qualify for additional funding since their funds are currently being spent? I guess I can kick that to Wayne or Mike, if you know the answer to that one.
Could you restate the question again? It was whether or not they'd be eligible for additional funding?
Yeah, so
If they have not already.
Yeah, there are some essential businesses who reached out who said they stayed open during this time, and of course their revenues are down because of all the stay-at-home orders, and hadn't received any funding from Congress, and they were wondering, will there be any additional funding kind of targeted directly to them since they've had to stay open and not bringing in additional revenues right now?
Well, I'm certain there will be other incentives. The two that are top of mind at the moment have to do with the Paycheck Protection program, which is intended if they were in a position where they had to lay off staff. That is the purpose of that program, is to help them bring that staff back and to get those people paid. And then the other avenue that an impacted business has, again, is that EIDLE loan, or the economic injury disaster loan. For those that are providing essential services and they're looking, maybe they're in a healthcare related personal protective equipment as an example, and they're looking to get capital to help as they supply against those kind of opportunities. I would recommend working with their lender. There are certainly incentives in place for SBA loans. As an example, through our normal 7(a) programming, all loans for a 6-month time frame, all loans are being funded by the SBA. And that would even be applicable to someone that gets a new SBA loan who perhaps does have an opportunity, maybe in that small category, they have an opportunity and they really need capital. So first place to start would be to reach out to your lender. All of the lenders have been briefed on our incentives, and I think that's would be the best recommendation I could give if there's an opportunity to grow at this time, or an opportunity for to support contract opportunities or what have you at this time.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. Following along some of this, I had a gentleman named Nate Wadey reach out via Facebook. He had a comment, but it kind of lends to a question as well. It says, I'm not a business owner, but CNBC reported that 243.4 million of the, or that's probably supposed to be billion, so 243.4 billion of the 349 billion PPP loans went directly to publicly traded companies during this pandemic, and I would be furious as a small business owner. Is there anything in the new law that would kind of focus this more on some of those smaller businesses as opposed to those types of businesses?
I would just note from Senator's perspective that this is something that I know that the SBA and Treasury Department are taking a look at in terms of those entities that were eligible. But the Senator certainly is committed to making certain that small businesses, to the greatest degree possible, those that are under 500 employees, are the ones that are the focus of the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program.
Thanks, Mike.
Right, and I would just add to that. I did see a statement earlier from the Secretary of Treasury that there was going to be more focus in terms of ensuring that those firms that are publicly traded are not eligible for this funding. So I believe there's going to be more focus in that area to make sure that that doesn't happen again, and so that more Main Street businesses, more rural businesses, more women and minority-owned firms can actually, get access to these funds.
Awesome. I know a lot of small businesses here would be happy to hear that. And that was a good lead into the next question. There was a comment that said there's a significant gap in funding opportunities for minority-owned businesses, specifically Black businesses, but minority-owned businesses. And does this new law provide more of an opportunity for minority-owned businesses, or do we see that on the horizon coming?
I know that is something that's a recommendation in terms of any type of fourth tranche of legislation that's being considered. Those are certainly recommendations I want to be able to take to the Senator for any future legislation that may come down the pipeline.
Awesome, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I haven't had the chance to dig into all of the details, but I know that has been a part of the focus. There are two specific categories that I remember being specified in this legislation, and it has to do with, number one, rural businesses. There's certainly a focus on helping more rural businesses here, and also there's a focus on women and minority-owned businesses as well. So I don't have the exact amount that's been earmarked in front of me, but I know that there was specific language intended to help businesses in those categories to get part of this funding.
And Wayne, as a quick follow-up, is that going to be allocated federally? Will that funding go directly to states so that these businesses can have access to it? Do you have more of like the process to access those funds?
Well, I'm going to assume that all of these funds that I'm referring to are coming through the commercial lending community, or through the lending community. But I believe within that there are going to be goals, if you will, to ensure that women and minority-owned businesses and rural-owned businesses are being serviced, and that they are being supported through this program. So what I'll do as a follow-up to this is, and as we get a few more details around this topic, I'll be sure to send that to your office and to our panelists so that everyone is abreast of exactly what's coming. And I do think there are some additional funds outside of the loans that I'm referring to. I believe there are some additional funds under the CARES Act that are intended to help businesses in those categories. So stay tuned, and I will send you those details. Remember, the president just signed this, and so we're still kind of learning the details in real time.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. Patty, here's a question. There was a comment made that federal assistance hadn't matched the Kansas Hire Fund, which they say was the best funding opportunity this individual has had thus far. Do you see any new funding like that coming? And then after she responds, maybe to Wayne, do you see anything federally that may match the Hire Fund coming?
Thanks, Brandon. The Hire Fund was extremely well received. We were able to reach about 330 small businesses in the hospitality industry all across the state. We had 1,700 applications. We're continuing to take those in case there are additional funds. And it was a very successful program. We worked with our partner, Network Kansas. It was pulled together in about 24 to 48 hours, and about a week from the origination of the program, the checks went out to the businesses. Right now, the state does not have any additional funds to bring to the program. So if there are additional funds to come, it would have to come from the federal government. But it was a very well-received, well-run program. We're very proud of it, but we know there were a lot of businesses we were not able to reach because we could only dedicate $5 million to it.
That was, I would say, that was an excellent program, and I was there, with Secretary Tolan and Patty. Of course, you were there, and the governor, and I think within a week or two, those funds were gone. I mean, it was the interest, and so it was really a great fund. In terms of our programming that's in place right now, here's the difference. The direct loans that are available through the SBA, what we're seeing because of the volume nationally, because of the volume of applications, the disbursement time frame, and I'm talking about the economic injury disaster loans, which really are a vehicle that would be very similar to the Hire Fund and could be utilized in the same fashion. Unfortunately, we're unable at the moment with our process and the volume, we're unable to get the funds dispersed as quickly as the state was able to do. And that's just merely due to the volume of applications and then the series of steps. I believe the Hire Funds were they capped, I believe, at 25,000 or maybe slightly more than that. Difference here on the economic injury disaster loans, those can go all the way up to $2 million. Now, the more complex the borrower's application, then the more in-depth the review and the clearance before ultimately that level of funding is dispersed. The funding through the economic injury disaster loans, they're intended to cover up to 6 months of operating expenses. And so there's a review of what the borrower submits or what the applicant submits in the way of operating expenses. There's a credit check, and then ultimately, the funds are dispersed. And I think overall the time frame, we're probably somewhere in the 4-week area, as opposed to the Hire program. Again, that was a pretty immediate disbursement within, I would say a few days or so. We do have the other avenues. You can always apply again through the lending community. Virtually all of the lenders in the state have agreements in place to use SBA loans and participate with SBA lending. Basically, what that means is the loans are guaranteed by the SBA on the back end. There are a number of flexibilities that lenders have with the SBA. And right now, in this time of crisis with the pandemic, I believe our lending community is going to be pretty flexible, given the borrower's ability to meet their basic credit requirements. So all that said, best avenue we have is the EIDLE program for those broad working expenses or operating expenses. And we do have the Paycheck Protection program coming for those entities that want to get people back to work. And you're still able to cover some other operating expenses, but just not to the degree that you can under the EIDLE program.
Awesome. Thanks, Wayne. One more for you. I'm going to combine a few of these that were submitted from Kelly Taylor and Valerie Mason. Both own small businesses but are self-employed, and the other folks that work in the shop are also self-employed. And the concern is that it kicks them out of Paycheck Protection and any other stimulus offer that they are aware of. They also cannot gain unemployment right now, and they need to continue to file claims every week. Still says they're denied. So they both are basically saying there's no income coming in and there hasn't been. What relief do individuals in that position have?
So under the Paycheck Protection program, there is the ability for sole proprietors and independent contractors to apply for that program, and they would use the Schedule C, and I believe it's line 31. Anyway, so based on their net income, there is a formula where they can apply for the Paycheck Protection program, and we're happy to give you those details as we get, inquiries from different business owners. That is one avenue. The economic injury disaster loan is another avenue, and again, the turnaround time is not as quick, but those are two programs that are intended for businesses, even independent contractors, to apply for, that disaster assistance. So those are two avenues that they have, and I would welcome any of those questions or what have you. If they could email me at wayne.bell@sba.gov, we'll get you responses pretty quickly and get you pointed in the right direction. You can visit our website at sba.gov to learn more about the economic injury disaster loans. And there's another product called EIDLE Advance, where business owners are able to basically get a forgivable grant up to $10,000, depending on the number of employees they have. So we've got the EIDLE economic injury disaster loan, and you've got the Paycheck Protection program, and sole proprietors are considered in there. So reach out to us.
Awesome. Thanks, Wayne. Commissioner Cruse, there was a comment that was submitted by Julie Howard Briol. If I got your name wrong, I apologize. It says, as long as we can operate in a safe way that the state deems safe, they should let us open back up or never have shut us down. Do you have, I know earlier you mentioned you all were kind of looking at plans for what a reopen would look like. What comments would you have for that?
I would say we are getting close to the expiration of the stay-at-home order. Kind of what happened in the past has already been done, and I think that I'm proud of mitigating that big surge of cases that happened. So I think what we did saved lives, and we're coming to the end of it now as far as the stay-at-home order goes. I think we have a responsibility in our community to understand that this virus is not going away. We have to keep taking those precautions as far as social distancing goes, and making sure that when the order is lifted, that you are able to have sanitation of your business, good hygiene, making sure that people are wearing masks. We're all sort of in this together, and we're responsible for keeping folks safe and ourselves safe. So I hope that answers your question. I think it's important for us all to understand this virus is not going away. We don't have a vaccine yet. What happened back then is being lifted in a few weeks or next week. And I hope that we can all sort of work together to make sure that we keep as many people safe as possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner. Wayne, there was a question from a gentleman named Trent Hughes that asked, are these no interest loans, what was just passed and signed into law? Are these no interest loans or are they grants? And how does one know how much the business qualifies for?
Okay, great question. So on the Paycheck Protection Program, the loans are 1% interest. And again, there's a formula depending on your payroll cost. Assuming you have employees, there are a few different formulas. But if you have employees, we're gonna take your average monthly payroll cost over 12 months. That would be multiplied by 2.5 to arrive at your eligible amount. There's also a factor in there that is intended to cover. Part of those proceeds are intended to cover other operating expenses such as mortgage interest, rents, utilities. So that's the Paycheck Protection Program. The overall term is 24 months. First 6 months are deferred. So it's really intended to, again, help the business owner bring their team back, to get them working. And it's that first 8 weeks of payroll costs basically are forgivable. So 1% interest rate. Again, so that's a loan that really has pretty moderate risk, and it's really intended again to cover those payroll costs and some additional operating expenses for the business. For the economic injury disaster loan, there are two different interest rates there for nonprofits, by the way, nonprofit organizations, a 501c3 and a 501c, I believe it is 19. 501c 19, 501c3, those are eligible for that particular program. And the interest rates for nonprofits are 2.75%. Those are placed on a 30-year term. First 12 months are deferred. For all other businesses, the interest rate is 3.75%. Again, a 12-month deferment period. And the loan is placed on the 30-year term. Those loans go up to a maximum amount of $2 million. On the Paycheck Protection Program, the maximum loan amount is $10 million. So, and I think what we've seen nationally on average for both of those, I believe the average loan amount is around $100,000. So hopefully that helps give you some idea on the terms for those.
Awesome. Thanks, Wayne. I think this next one might be you as well, or Mike, but I'm combining. I've received a lot of feedback from essentially new businesses, those that were created between maybe December and March of this year. And the question is, are there funds available for them without some of the strings of the Paycheck Protection, that if you have to have your employee base back up to February levels by a June date and they're new and they don't really have all of that, there was concern about, one, qualifying, and then two, should they even apply and where do they fit in on getting assistance, because all of the stipulations, I guess, kind of boxes them out. And that was a combination of a comment by Whitney Marshall, a little bit of Janelle King, and some other feedback I received.
Yeah, it's a good question. Under the Paycheck Protection Program, they had to have been in business. Basically, really that first quarter of the year, they needed to be in business. I think the cutoff date had to be on operation before February 15th of this year. And there is a formula that, again, takes into consideration either their payroll costs or their net profit or net income. And so without getting too far into the details, I guess the short answer is yes, fairly new businesses. They didn't have to be in business for the entire year, but they did have to be in business pretty recent, as recent as before February 15th. And if they are eligible to apply for PPP, and we can go through those details. Under EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, I would say likewise, probably need a few months history because there are some specific questions in the application that ask about their operating expenses and that kind of thing. And that really factors right into the loan amount that is ultimately proposed by the SBA under the EIDL program. That particular program, the borrower doesn't ask for a specific amount. It really is literally based on their operating expenses. And so those operating expenses have to be specified. And there will be eventually some communication between a loan officer and the applicant to confirm information that's being provided. And so assuming there are records to support the request, then the challenge would be for a business that's only been in existence for 2 or 3 months. They would be challenged with having those records to support the operating costs and the needs. So it is a challenge, no doubt, for a very new company. It's definitely a challenge on both of these programs, but it is possible if they've been operating for longer than a quarter.
Awesome. We've got another question. I'll give the full question because there's a little bit to it, and I think there's other people out there watching in the same situation. This was submitted by Amy Ross. She says, it seems the smallest small businesses were completely left out. I own and operate 2 Pilates studios in Wichita and opened the second one on the east side in October of 2018. So of course I had a negative 2018 and 2019 for the business, so I cannot file unemployment or PPP, and I did file for the EIDL since it was supposed to go to every small business. And then nope, you can only get up to $1,000 per employee. I don't have any employees. I had just hired an IC, I don't know what that is, an IC in March and was interviewing to hire a front desk employee. Things were finally starting to look promising, and now just keep getting kicked in the teeth because I'm too small to care about. So when are we going to help the true small businesses, the same ones Kansas is built on? Is there anything out there for someone like Amy? And if not, is there anything coming that may help someone like Amy?
Yeah. First, I want to encourage Amy to keep fighting, keep doing what has made her successful today. Really commend her for opening and operating that business and expanding even a second location. So it sounds like she's a great candidate for an EIDL loan. The loan amount may not be very much, but it's going to be based on her operating expenses. It sounds like she's made some hiring decisions. She's had rent and that sort of thing. So I would encourage her to apply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Whether or not she had employees, it sounds like she had an independent contractor. That's what I'm going to assume the IC was. She had an independent contractor and perhaps another team member that she may have hired. She's got some expenses that qualify for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So please reach out to us if you haven't applied. I would love to talk with her further and get her down the path of applying for that Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So hang in there.
Just to follow up on Wayne's observation, of that $50 billion that was directed to the EIDL EIDL program in this most recent piece of legislation, there was $10 billion that was designated for EIDL advanced grants. And so that's a bit of a different provision beyond just the loan. Of course, Senator recognizes there's an awful lot of demand out there and an awful lot of need, and that provision was put in there to try to help the neediest of the neediest on a grant-based qualification as well.
Thanks, Mike and Wayne. This question is probably both for Patty and Wayne. I received a few phone calls from some pastors just concerned about church and how the size restrictions and stay at home has impacted their ability to raise revenues through tithing or other ways. Is there any specific relief for the church coming from either the state or federal government?
Wayne, do you want me to tackle that first?
Yes, please.
There is no specific funding, granting mechanism for the faith community unless they are organized as a 501c3 and, as Wayne indicated, or 501c19, then they are eligible for the SBA programs. But unfortunately, there just aren't any state programs that are designed to provide funding for the faith community at this point in time.
Right. And I would just add to that. So under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan program, they could apply to that program. What's important, what I've learned and what we've learned internally, is that if they have as a part of the church's operating activities, if they have a school or a camp or some other kind of service that was a fee-based service, then that would be an eligible operating expense that could be, that could make the entity eligible for the economic injury disaster loan. And then likewise, under the Paycheck Protection Program, again, if they're organized as a 501c3 or 501c19, they could apply under those programs. I'm hoping that there's some perhaps other federal sources, other monies that would be available, perhaps even outside of SBA programming. But within the avenues that we have, if they're not structured as a 501c3, 501c19, then it becomes really complicated and challenging for them to confirm eligibility. So yeah, I know it's tough, and I would ask again, anyone with questions, when in doubt, there's no harm in applying. So no harm in applying for the programs, and if there's any eligibility that fits, then certainly we'll do all we can do to help you, but understanding that we have those specific guidelines and had to be structured in that way.
Brandon, one other program that I might offer to the faith community to at least explore would be the Community Service Tax Credit Program, particularly if they have a daycare facility, child care facility that is a part of their parish, their church, because they could be eligible for the Community Service Tax Credit Program. And I would be more than happy to respond directly if they want to reach out. My email is patty.clark@ks.gov. And if they just want to ask me some questions, take them in the right direction.
All right, thank you both. You all have a lot of questions that were pre-submitted to you, so we will try to get answers to those individuals. We have questions from those watching, so I'd like to start answering some of those as well.
So I want to start off with a question from Christina Long. Does the Kansas Department of Commerce interact with the National Minority Business Development Association? She believes they receive CARES funds specific for minority-owned businesses. And she wonders if Commerce functions as a liaison to help funnel funding.
Christina, I will get back with you on that after I check with Rhonda Harris, who is our Minority and Women's Business Program Director. I've made myself a note as the question was asked. I will make sure I get back to you with an answer to that.
Perfect.
Yeah, and just the only thing I would add on that particular topic is the Minority Business Development Agency is housed within the U.S. Department of Commerce, and I believe they have the closest center, I believe, is Denver, and then the next to the east of us may be in Chicago. So there is certainly would be an opportunity if the state, could partner with them in some fashion. That would be wonderful. So, but anyway, yeah, I'm very moderately familiar with that agency, and that's what I know of in terms of their closest operating facilities.
Perfect, thank you. Our next question is from Jacob Wayman. Are there talks of changing the percentage of what's forgivable? Right now it's 75% of payroll, but he's hearing that it may move to 50%.
I've not heard that. Everything that we've seen tells us 75% of the loan has to be used for those direct, those payroll costs. 25% is intended for that those overhead expenses that I mentioned, such as rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. So we'll see. Now, it's a great question, and it's a question that we get quite a bit, because when you think about it, as you bring your team on board or back on board, perhaps there could be changes in personnel where those payroll costs just may not equal, exactly 75%. So internally, we have requested more guidance on that, and I would imagine there's going to be more guidance coming because that's just a part of the Paycheck Protection Program that no one's had to deal with yet, because we're not past that initial, time frame of the 8 weeks. But that's coming, and I would imagine more clarification is coming soon.
Perfect. Commissioner Cruse, this one might be for you. We've had several people chime in asking what reopening looks like for our beauty industries and our retail businesses locally.
So we had a conversation this morning. We will be following up with this industry specifically. Over the next week, we did talk about having a meeting on Monday. We're still trying to figure that out as well. I know that we're trying to take each individual industry to figure out what is best for them with their feedback. So that's something that we're trying to still figure out. I appreciate anybody who wants to email me suggestions, but we are still working that out specific to that industry and all others.
Perfect, thank you. From Jamie, how long of a process is it for small businesses to receive funding?
Under the Paycheck Protection Program, there's a pretty quick turnaround. Once the funds are available, and I'm anticipating in this second phase, I'm anticipating that perhaps as early as Monday or Tuesday, applications will be able to be submitted through the lending community. So whenever that is turned on again, the approval timeframes have been really pretty quick, assuming the application, everything required is submitted and the lender has everything. So probably that dialogue with the lender and that communication with the lender over just a period of a day or two. Now, understanding there's a lot of volume, so no matter what bank you're dealing with, they're going to have a little bit of a backlog or a little bit of, there'll be other applications that they're kind of navigating through. So understanding they've got those applications they're dealing with, the approval decision once submitted is almost immediate. So that approval decision occurs pretty quickly. And then from there, it's just a matter of how quickly the bank can do its disbursement. So Paycheck Protection Program, I think it's reasonable to expect within a week or two from your application date, once you're notified you've been approved, you're probably a week, 2 weeks at the most before you've got funds. And as far as the economic injury disaster loan, that's not as quick. As I said earlier, that's the one that goes through our online system. And you're probably looking at about a 4-week turnaround on the economic injury disaster loans.
Perfect. As a follow-up, is there any sort of assistance available for businesses to get help that same day or in a matter of days?
For clarification, what type of help are we talking about? Financial assistance, or are we talking about technical assistance? Yes, you can get technical assistance immediately. Right now, you can reach out to our resource partners online. You can always call them, but I think right now communicating online is probably going to get you quick responses. And that I'm talking about the Kansas Small Business Development Center, as well as SCORE. Both of those groups have counselors in the area and counselors nationally, and they're set up to do remote assistance or provide remote assistance. So you can reach out to our partners. If you're a veteran, you can reach out to the Veterans Business Resource Center. Likewise, they're set up. And if you have difficulty finding these groups, just go to our website, sba.gov, and we've got a link for local resources. And navigating through that link, you'll find the resources who can help and who can answer questions. And again, if you're looking for funds for your business, start with your bank or start with a lender. We have a lender match tool on our website. That's an avenue for basically finding a lender. We've got a tool that's a search tool where you can plug in the zip code or the area that you're living in, and we've got a whole list of lenders that are available to reach out to. So quickest avenue to get funds right away would be going through our lending partners.
Awesome. Thanks,
Can I
Wayne.
jump in a question real fast? So I just want to ask, how does the PPP compete kind of with unemployment? If you have a small business who has employees who will make more with unemployment with the additional $600, can you kind of speak to that? And then secondly, with that, with the stay-at-home order, there is a definite date, but I mean, what if the governor comes out tomorrow and says we're going to extend it, or what if the county commission extends it? I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying hypothetically, since there's no definite date for the 8-week timeline, can you kind of speak to that?
Yes, and great questions. We've gotten these questions in a similar way, little different way. From many business owners that are concerned. You've got the stay-at-home orders. How do I bring people back to work under those circumstances? And quite frankly, not every business is really situated to do that. If there are duties that their team could perform remotely, if there's training, if there's other tasks that they can do remotely, then the Paycheck Protection Program may make sense and may be the right avenue for a particular business to utilize. But there are some cases where the business is really heavily reliant on the public coming into their facility or their place of business. And in those cases, they may have to make the business decision to continue with funding those unemployment benefits and allowing perhaps their teams to work that way. Again, what the idea is of the Paycheck Protection Program is to get people back to work where they're able to make their full pay and not have to utilize unemployment benefits. It is a difficult decision. Now, once from an employer standpoint, once they make those return offers back to their teams, they've got to come back to work, and that can be difficult to navigate from from an employee standpoint. Even though they know they may make the same amount, or maybe even in some cases may make more on unemployment, the reality is if they've got a job and their employer is requiring them to come back to work, then they've got to go back to work, or they lose the unemployment benefit even. So now here's what I've been hearing as well, though. The unemployment benefits have been delayed. So the quickest way, and I think the most effective and efficient way to resume income is if the small business has received the Paycheck Protection loan and they're calling their people back. Their teams need to go back to work, because that's the most that's going to be the quickest way that they're going to get income and not run the risk of losing those unemployment benefits because they've been extended a job and they're not coming back.
This is Patty, and I want to jump in and reaffirm what Wayne just said in terms of a portion of the qualification for unemployment insurance is that you don't have a job. When you're called back to work, then you do have a job, you have been offered a job. But the other thing I want to reaffirm is the technical assistance resources, KSBDC and SCORE that was mentioned earlier. Those are absolutely fabulous people who have been trained inside and out on all the programs, and businesses can pick up the phone or check in electronically and ask these types of questions, get very thorough and clear answers, and work through various options that a business has in all of these programs.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. I know I asked you all for an hour. Probably should have asked you for 2, but I definitely want to thank each of you for joining us today and dedicating an hour to this. I want to offer you all each an opportunity just to give a closing statement as we wrap up today. And we'll start off with Mike.
Councilman, thank you. And again, thank you to you and the city of Wichita for hosting this conversation. Would just reemphasize on behalf of Senator Moran, thank you to our small business owners. Thank you for your interest, certainly in the legislation and the programs that we discussed today, but also by your participation. It's obvious that you have great interest for your employees and for being contributors to our community. Please know the Senator is an ally in your effort, and we'll come out on the other side of this better, in part because of conversations like these, and in great part because of the goodwill that we extend to one another.
Thank you, Mike, and definitely let Senator Moran know we thank him as well. Patty?
Thank you, Brandon, and I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank the city of Wichita for hosting this. If you want to do it again and want to do it for 2 hours, we're happy to participate. Thanks to Senator Moran for being a true champion in all of this. Thanks to Wayne for being such a great partner as we established the paperwork to get the declaration and then moving forward with processing of loans. Thanks to all of you, because I know everybody's been putting in extra hours. Thanks for this opportunity to engage.
Thank you, Patty, and also let Secretary Tolan know we appreciate it as well. Commissioner Cruse.
Thank you, community, for your hard work and trying to get through this as best you can together. Small business is the backbone of everything that we do here in this great city, and I'm so thankful that you guys are willing to ask questions, be as frank as possible. I see some of these comments here, and if they weren't answered today, please reach back out. This is a complicated subject matter. It's okay if you don't know all the answers. It continues to kind of get more complicated, it seems, as things go on. But I'm encouraged by this conversation, and I hope that we can continue to work together to really get through this pandemic. It's not easy, and I hope that you'll be well and you'll stay encouraged, you'll stay kind to each other, and make sure that you understand it's okay not to be okay. So reach out if there's some help that you need.
Thank you, Commissioner Cruse, and also thank you for being a great partner in all of this as well. Wayne.
All right. Councilman Johnson, I want to thank you for your leadership, for bringing us together, giving us an opportunity to share and talk in this fashion. I want to certainly thank Senator Moran and his office. I want to thank you, Mike Zamrzla. Really appreciate Senator Moran reaching out to us. I had a conversation with him probably 3 weeks ago now, and I can tell you he's genuinely interested in helping the people of our state, our community, to the fullest in terms of utilizing these federal resources. And so anyway, again, a big thank you to his office. Also want to, again, just thank all of the other panelists, Commissioner Cruse, each one of you, and then certainly my partner, Patty Clark, with the Kansas Department of Commerce. We've worked very closely again, and it's just through efforts like this that continue to help our businesses around the state, help our businesses in our community. I'm confident that we're going to get through this. I know it's very painful. I know it's been very challenging, but I can tell you everyone that is on this panel is extremely committed to the success of our community and the success of each business owner that's represented here. And we're here to help. Continue to reach out to us. And if there's a way, we'll find a way. And if not, we'll get you connected to other resources that can help. So keep fighting, and let's continue to use the resources that we have, and we're going to do everything we can to help. So thank you.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you for being a great partner in helping us strengthen our small business community here in Wichita. Again, to everyone watching, we did receive a lot of feedback prior to this, so I do apologize if we didn't get to your question. But if you did drop your email, somebody from one of our teams will get back to you, and we will all continue this conversation because we're all talking about it, and maybe we can reconvene again in the future. But again, thank you all for tuning in and engaging. Definitely know this is a tough time, especially for our small businesses and entrepreneurs, and I hear those stories just about every day. But Kansas has an unwavering spirit of relentless resilience, and we'll definitely come out of this stronger as we're working together, and you can see that here today with everybody on this call. So thank you all, and stay safe. Continue to wash your hands, soap and water, wear your mask out in public, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.